My name is Nick, and I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018. My goal is at least 20 people.
In this shooting there, the shooter, and you can see, bracing the weapon, the sirens, it looks like, going off there.
Voices and demons?
Where's the voices? What the f***? Where the f*** am I? Holy sh**. What happened?
Shut up.
School shootings are terrifying events. Some of them were even caught on camera. The fear, chaos, and desperation of the victims are haunting. And once you see it, you'll never unsee it. So at your own risk, let's look at the most disturbing school shootings ever captured on camera.
We're learning disturbing details about the 17-year-old who shot and killed a 16-year-old girl and wounded another student at their high school in Nashville, Tennessee yesterday.
Person for the police department a short time ago telling us that the suspected shooter in this incident, as well as one other student, have both been killed.
10:13 a.m., March 27th, 2023. Police get a call about an active shooter at the Covenant School in Nashville, Tennessee. 14 minutes later, the attacker was dead, but not before 6 innocent lives were taken. The shooter, identified as Audrey Hale, was a former student of that school. She was a 28-year-old illustrator and graphic designer, having graduated from Nasi College of Art and Design in 2022. Those who knew her described her as a troubled individual. A former instructor recalled Hale breaking down in class and later reposting on Facebook about the loss of a romantic partner. Around 2022, Hale asked to be referred to by the name Aiden and male pronouns. Police initially identified Hale as female, but later acknowledged the shooter's identity as a transgender man. According to a friend, though, Hale had an obsession with childhood and staying a child. Hale's parents were also under the impression that their child no longer owned firearms, believing any previously owned weapons had already been sold. In reality, though, Hale had legally purchased 7 firearms from 5 different stores and stashed them around the house as they prepared for this massacre. The attack had been planned for months. A handwritten diagram of the school, including details on entry points, was found, along with many journals, firearm accessories, and a side note. Hale had reportedly studied other mass murderers, taken notes on their actions to make this even more catastrophic. Now, on the morning of the shooting, Hale sent a message to an old friend at 9:57 a.m., calling a previous post a side note and stating that this was the day it would all end. The friend immediately called a crisis hotline and then alerted the Davidson County Sheriff's Office at 10:13 a.m., the same time the first 911 calls were made from the school. Hale arrived at the school in a Honda Fit at 9:54 a.m., and at 10:11 a.m., armed with an AR-15 style rifle, an AR style pistol, and a handgun, she fires through the glass doors and enters the building. A custodian saw Hale shooting the doors open and try to run, but Hale fired multiple times, killing him. The gunfire triggered the school's fire alarm, adding to the panic. Hale would make their way up to the second floor, where 3 children and a substitute teacher were gunned down. After killing them, they would walk up and fire additional rounds into their bodies. Hale would move to the second floor hallway, firing into 2 third-grade classrooms, injuring 1 student with a graze wound. The head of the school, hearing the fire alarm, unknowingly walked into the hallway and was immediately shot many times before Hale fired a final shot with their handgun. Then they go up to the second floor hallway, checking church offices for more victims before heading downstairs. In the lobby, they fired at random, but didn't hit anyone before returning to the second floor. Inside the church sanctuary, Hale fired 7 rounds into a stained glass window, depicting Adam and Eve. But it was at this point that Hale finally noticed the cops had arrived. By 10:23 a.m., officers had entered the school. A teacher directed them to where the students were in lockdown and mentioned that 2 were missing. As officers cleared the first floor, they heard gunshots from above and, without hesitation, rushed to the second floor.
Next.
Hale was still shooting at around 10:26 a.m., literally 3 minutes after those officers made their way inside. They finally locked eyes on him, leading to this fatal shootout.
Down, suspect down. Hey, hold the.
Hale was dead. They got shot in the head, torso, left arm, and right thigh, killing him instantly. I mean, honestly, you gotta give credit to the cops though. They carried out that job flawlessly. But anyways, the school staff and students were evacuated. Police later discovered more than a dozen journals, side notes, and notes on school shootings owned by Hale. Initially, authorities labeled the writings as a manifesto, but later described them as rambling and devoid of any clear political or social ideology. However, in November 2023, 3 pages from Hale's diary were leaked, showing hate-filled language directed at the school and its children. But even with that, a clear motive couldn't be established. So now if you're wondering why Hale did this, your guess is probably as good as ours.
My name is Nick, and I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018. My goal is at least 20 people with an AR-15 and a couple tracer rounds. I think I can get done. Location is Stone Douglas in Parkland, Florida.
That video was recorded just days before 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz stormed into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, unleashing a deadly attack that left 17 people dead and 17 wounded. Now, for context, Cruz's life was pretty hard from the very beginning. He was born to Brenda Norma Woodard, a convicted felon and drug addict, and after her death, he was adopted by Roger and Linda Cruz, a couple who would give him a home, but would later also pass away, leaving him orphaned once again. In the midst of these losses, Cruz battled his own personal demons. Between 2014 and 17, he shuffled through 6 different schools, each attempting to manage his growing behavioral issues. In 2014, he was placed in a school designed for children with emotional and learning disabilities, but even there, he made threats against other students. Despite the numerous red flags, Cruz was still able to legally purchase an AR-15 style semi-auto rifle in February 2017 from a gun store in Coral Springs, passing all the required background checks somehow. The rifle became part of his own growing arsenal, which already included at least 1 shotgun and several other rifles. His social media presence was equally alarming. He posted disturbing content, including a Snapchat video of him cutting himself and a chilling YouTube comment where he openly stated his desire to become a school shooter. The warning signs were there, but no one stopped him in time.
Today is the day that it all begins. The day of my massacre shall begin. All the kids in school will run in fear and hide.
That was the video Cruz recorded on February 14th, 2018, just before taking an Uber to head to the high school to carry out the attack. At approximately 2:19 p.m., he gets to the school and enters Building 12, a 3-story structure with 30 classrooms, usually filled with about 900 students and 30 teachers. Making his way to the base of the stairwell on the first floor, he quickly assembles his weapon. And as he did, he was interrupted by a student, Christopher McKenna. Cruz looks at him and gives this chilling warning.
You better get out of here. Something bad's about to happen.
The footage captures the exact moment McKenna's life was spared. Had he stepped in just 1 second later, he would have been Cruz's first victim. McKenna, seizing this opportunity, ran away and alerted staff members about the imminent danger. Meanwhile, Cruz stepped into the first floor hallway, where he spotted 3 students, Martin Anguiano, Gina Montalto, and Luke Hoyer, just outside room 1215. Without hesitation, he opens fire, killing all 3. A 4th student, Ashley Bays, was struck in the upper leg but survived. From there, he continued his rampage, shooting through the windows of 4 closed classroom doors. Bullets tore through the walls, killing 6 more students and wounding 13 others. 2 staff members also lost their lives in the chaos.
Holy shit! Oh my god! Oh my god!
The deafening sound of gunfire triggered the building's fire alarm, adding to the confusion. Earlier that day, the school had already conducted a fire drill, so when the alarm blared again, many students weren't sure how to react. All they could do was scream and scramble to safety. During the attack, there was confusion among school staff about who had the authority to call a code red lockdown. This delay meant that no immediate security measures were put in place, and it wasn't until around 2:21 p.m., after a staff member discovered a victim's body and heard gunfire, that the lockdown was finally activated. An armed school resource officer from the Broward County Sheriff's Office was on campus at the time of the shooting. However, instead of confronting the shooter, he remained outside while Cruz continued his deadly rampage. He first killed 2 staff members near the stairwell on the first floor, before moving up to the second floor, where he fired into 2 empty classrooms. On the third floor, he found students and staff trapped in the hallway. He opened fire, killing 5 students and 1 staff member, while wounding 3 other students and a teacher. After several minutes, Cruz suddenly stopped firing, possibly due to a weapon malfunction. He discarded his rifle on the 3rd floor and then slipped into the crowd of terrified students, using the chaos to make his escape. From there, he casually walks into a fast food restaurant, pausing at a mall to grab a soda along the way. Meanwhile, law enforcement had stormed the building, escorting students to safety as they worked to secure the scene. Cruz lingered around the mall for a while before finally leaving on foot at 3:01 p.m. Surveillance cameras captured the moment he trekked on the road, about a mile away from the school. But his description had already been blasted across police radio, alerting every officer in the area. And it wasn't long before he was tracked down and taken into custody. But here's where it gets interesting. Once he was caught, Cruz pulled a move so ridiculous, it's almost hard to believe.
What's going on today, bro?
The demons, man.
Demons?
Voices.
Voices? Voices and demons?
Where's the voices? What the f***? Where the f*** am I? Holy sh**. What happened? Shut up.
Yeah, his acting was pathetic. He tried to play the voices and demons card, hoping to dodge accountability with an insanity plea. But let's be real, nobody was buying that. The cops saw right through that crap, and so did the jury. He was originally recommended for the death penalty. But in November 2022, he was given life in prison without the possibility of parole. Meaning, goodbye forever, Nicholas Cruz.
Tonight, inside the unspeakable horror, officers running to the scene with the 18-year-old gunman already inside Robb Elementary School.
May 24th, 2022 started like any other day at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. But by the time it ended, it had become one of the deadliest school shootings in recent history. The shooter, 18-year-old Salvador Ramos, had once been a student there. But what makes this tragedy even more horrifying wasn't just the senseless violence. It was the fact that law enforcement stood outside for an agonizing 77 minutes before finally confronting him. Months before this shooting, Ramos had already started showing troubling signs. He tried to get his older sister to buy him a gun, but she refused. And then on May 17th, just a day after his 18th birthday, he legally purchases a Smith & Wesson semi-auto rifle from a local gun store. And 3 days later, he buys another one. Investigators find that at least one of his rifles had been modified with a Hellfire trigger device, which increases the firing speed. In the days leading up to the attack, Ramos wasn't exactly quiet about his intentions either. He sent somebody on Instagram a receipt for an AR-15 style rifle, along with 500 rounds of ammo he had purchased. And a day before the massacre, he posted a picture of 2 rifles on his Instagram, making his intentions crystal clear, and showed that his mind was already set on destruction. That tragic morning, Ramos gets into this heated argument with his 66-year-old grandmother over the fact that he wasn't going to graduate high school. The fight escalated in the worst way imaginable, as he grabbed one of his guns and shot her in the face. Miraculously, she survived, but with blood still on his hands, Ramos steals her black 2008 Ford F-150 and speeds off, heading straight for Robb Elementary. Meanwhile, at the school, a teacher had propped open the door with a rock while running to her car to grab some food. At that exact moment, she sees Ramos crash his grandmother's truck into a ditch nearby. Realizing something was seriously wrong, she ran back inside to grab her phone and call 911. But before anyone could react, Ramos was already walking toward the school, armed and dangerous. He casually strolls inside, completely unchallenged. The hallways are empty, but one student peeked out of his classroom, saw Ramos, and immediately ran back inside to hide. Ramos then enters a classroom that was internally connected to another, where about 40 students and a couple of teachers were inside. Without hesitation, he opens fire. Some students desperately try to play dead, including Maya Cedillo, who smeared herself with the blood of her classmate to make it look like she had already been shot. Now, officers get there 3 minutes after Ramos enters the building. They make it to rooms 111 and 112. But as soon as Ramos fired at them, hitting 2 officers, they backed off. Instead of pushing forward, they retreated and stood outside, pleading with the shooter to have mercy on the victims, while innocent students lay dying inside those classrooms.
Sir, if you can hear me, please put your firearm down, sir. Please don't hurt anyone else.
Outside the school, desperate parents begged these officers to go in and stop this person. But when they refused, some parents try to rush in themselves. But instead of helping, the officers would tackle them, pin them to the ground, and even threaten to use tasers if they didn't back off. It's great police work. Meanwhile, inside the school, Ramos was still with those children. Now, the problem wasn't just fear. The officers weren't properly trained for this kind of combat, and Ramos had an AR-15, a far more powerful weapon than the standard-issued firearms they carried, like it made a difference. And then on top of this, there was total confusion over who was in charge. No one knew who to take orders from, so instead, they would just stand around for over an hour. To make matters worse, in the middle of an active school shooting, one officer even took the time to sanitize his hands. Yeah, while kids are in there being slaughtered, this officer prioritizes clean hands. You can't make this shit up. Finally, after 77 agonizing minutes, a United States Border Patrol Tactical Unit agent carrying a shield led a team into the classroom. Ramos, who was hiding in a closet, opened fire on him. The officers returned fire, killing him on the spot. The nightmare's finally over, but the damage? Wow. 22 people died, including Ramos, while 21 others were fatally injured. Families were shattered. A community was left in ruins. And the world was left questioning how those officers waited for over an hour to save these dying children.
Next tonight, the newly released video of the takedown, a gunman on a college campus in Seattle. One person killed, 2 wounded, and the hero student tackling the shooter as he was reloading.
Surveillance video shows the gunman, Aaron Ibarra, holding a double-barreled shotgun. Seconds after he allegedly shot one student, John Mice, a student safety monitor, runs out with pepper spray as Ibarra attempts to reload.
On June 5th, 2014, a gunman walked onto the campus of Seattle Pacific University thinking he's about to carry out a massacre. But his plan fell apart quicker than he ever expected. The shooter, 27-year-old Aaron Ibarra, had a history of mental illness and had fixated on SPU as his target. In the days leading up to the attack, he visited the campus and managed to convince 2 female students to give him a private tour of Otto Miller Hall. To them, it was probably just a random request, but in reality, Ibarra's scouting out the building mapping out the possible escape routes students might use if a shooting broke out. So on the day of the incident, he drives past Otto Miller Hall to make sure students were inside before parking his white pickup truck nearby. Armed with a loaded shotgun, a large hunting knife, and multiple rounds of ammunition, he steps onto the campus with deadly intentions. His first victim was Paul Lee, a student he approached while showing off his gun. When Lee didn't react the way Ibarra expected, showing no fear, Ibarra shot him in the back of the head at point-blank range. The blast also hit another student, Thomas Fowler, who was standing nearby. Ibarra then tried to fire at a female student, but his gun misfired, giving her the chance to escape. Still determined, he reloaded and walked into Otto Miller Hall, where he found Tristan Cooper Roth sitting at a table. Ibarra told him he had just killed a man for disrespecting him and warned him not to move. Moments later, he saw Sarah Williams coming down the stairs and shot her in the upper torso. But then, Ibarra's gun misfired again, and that single moment changed everything. Student security guard John Mace, who had been waiting for this chance, jumped into action. He hits Ibarra with pepper spray, tackles him to the ground, and wrestles that shotgun away. Even as Ibarra tried to pull out his knife, Mace managed to keep him pinned down until others rushed in to help. This entire situation happened within minutes and was caught on the hall's security camera. At 3:24 p.m., frantic 911 calls flooded dispatchers. First responders arrived quickly, rushing the injured to the hospital while police took Ibarra into custody. During questioning, he admitted he was inspired by Columbine and other school shootings. He also claimed he hadn't picked specific targets, he just shot at those he felt disrespected him. Now, he later tried to plead insanity, however, the jury believed he was completely sane. He was found guilty of first-degree murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, and 1 count of assault. The judge didn't hold back, sentencing him to 112 years in prison.
Ethan Crumbley is accused of opening fire at the school, killing at least 4 of his classmates and injuring several others.
Just before 1 p.m. on November 30th, 2021, a shooter opens fire at Oxford High School in Detroit, Exurb, Michigan. Surveillance cams captured then 15-year-old Ethan Robert Crumbley walking into the bathroom, then stepping out a minute later with a semi-automatic handgun. Right after that, he would start shooting in the hallway while hundreds of students were moving between classes. As panic set in and students ran for safety, he moved with purpose, firing into classrooms and at anyone who couldn't get away fast enough. However, thanks to the fast actions of students and staff, he wasn't able to actually enter any classrooms. And that's because Oxford High School had trained for situations like this, using an active shooter response program called ALICE: Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. This method teaches people how to react strategically, like making noise to cause distractions and creating distance from the shooter. It's sad that we have to have something like this. Teachers would have this special security device called Night Lock installed at the base of every classroom door, preventing forceful entry. According to students, an announcement came over the intercom warning them about an active shooter, and that's when teachers immediately started locking doors, barricading entryways, and covering windows, making it clear that this wasn't just another drill. Some students described hearing loud bangs at first, not realizing they were gunshots until reality set in, at which point they had to take cover. Now, just minutes after the shooting began, law enforcement received over 100 calls reporting the situation, and as soon as officers arrived, they started evacuating students from different parts of the school, since Oxford High is a pretty large campus. However, it seems that Ethan realized this and had tried to use it to his advantage. One piece of footage from the shooting captured the moment when a group of students inside a classroom heard someone outside claiming to be an officer from the sheriff's department, telling them to open the door.
Yeah, he said it's safe to come out.
Now, we're not willing to take that risk right now. I can't hear you. We're not taking that risk right now.
Now, of course, the teacher's not going to risk this and open the door to get blown in the face by Ethan's 9mm semi-automatic handgun, so he stalled a bit, And the next thing that supposed officer said sent every student into that classroom into full panic mode.
Yeah, bro. He said bro. Red flag.
Go.
Slow down, you're fine.
Yeah, an officer casually saying bro, huge red flag. Luckily, these students in the classroom were able to escape through a window and get to safety. Meanwhile, Crumbly was taken into custody after killing 4 people and injuring 7 others. He was charged as an adult with some of the most serious crimes possible: 1 count of terrorism causing death, 4 counts of first-degree murder, 7 counts of assault with intent to murder, and 12 counts of felony firearm possession. And despite his age, the law didn't go easy on him. He was given life in prison without the chance of parole. No way out. Ever.
Ed New this morning, we're learning about a school shooting at a high school in Ocala. Marion County deputies say a student was shot in the ankle and a suspect is in custody.
This adrenaline rush that, I'm about to just do something, and, I spend most of my time in a room alone. So, I'm getting this rush. So that's what I was feeling.
April 20th, 2018. The day started like any other at Forest High School. Students are driving through the school's gates while the school buses rumbled in, unloading students onto a busy campus, home to over 2,300 of them. At 8:25 a.m., Sky Boucher, a 19-year-old former student who had dropped out in 2016, arrived in a 2006 Nissan SUV. He pulls into the student's parking lot, grabs a bag and a guitar case, and makes his way into the school. Without drawing any attention, he climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor and slipped into a restroom in hallway D. Inside, he puts on his tactical vest and gloves. From the guitar case, he took out a sawed-off 1930 shotgun that he had bought through a private sale online. After a moment, he stepped out of the bathroom as his adrenaline faded into confusion. He walked across the hall to a classroom door, but it was locked. English teacher Jennifer Haddon was handing out worksheets. It was the first period, and she was getting ready to take attendance. She had no idea that just outside her classroom, a former student was preparing to fire a gun. At 8:37 a.m., a loud explosion shook the hallway. A junior named Evan had been standing near a trash can by the hallway D door when the shot was fired. Boucher had just pulled the trigger, blasting a hole in the bottom of the classroom door. At first, no one knew exactly what happened. Haddon later recalled seeing what looked like bits of wood floating in the air and thinking a trash can had exploded. Then she saw Evan. He was bleeding from his left ankle, crying out in pain as he struggled back to his desk before collapsing onto it. Haddon tried to call 911, but her phone service was spotty. Instead, she would call the front office to report that a student was hurt, though she wasn't sure how. Principal Brent Carson and school resource officer Jimmy Long, a sheriff's deputy, rushed to the classroom. Basketball coach Spencer Ashley was also called in to help Evan. For a few moments, everyone tried to figure out what had just happened. Then, the smell of gunpowder filled the air. That's when they realized someone had fired a gun inside the school. The principal and coach immediately sprinted through the hallway shouting code red to warn others. But they didn't know that the shooter had already surrendered to another teacher, Kelly McCannis-Panasuk, just a few doors down. After hearing Evan scream in pain, Boucher dropped the gun in the hallway and raised his hands. That's when McCannis-Panasuk, who had just led a panicked student into her classroom, stepped out into the hall. A student named Thomas Canajeter, who had heard the gunshot, peeked out of his classroom and saw a man standing near a shotgun on the floor, wearing what looked like a bulletproof vest. The man was talking to a teacher. Boucher told McCannis-Panasuk that he wanted to be arrested. He said that he was mentally ill, that he hadn't meant to hurt anyone, and that he didn't think the gun would actually fire. The teacher told him to stay put while she called the office to report the shooting. Boucher stepped into the classroom and emptied several shells and a knife from his vest pockets. A minute later, Officer Long arrived and handcuffed Boucher, who didn't resist, before questioning him.
Down on the ground. What the hell? Put your hands behind your back. Do you go to this school?
I used to, sir.
What the?
I'm sorry, sir.
What did you say?
I wasn't raised by the right people.
Are you kidding me?
There's a lot of violence. I don't know.
5345 area. The front doors of the main building are all locked. I'm walking around the inside.
Are you serious?
I don't know why.
Don't say another word. Don't say another word. Do you have anything else on you?
No, sir.
Do you have any other weapons on this campus? Do you have any other explosives on this campus?
Sir, I put all my stuff on the table behind you, sir. Shells and a knife. That's it.
What is your name?
Sky Boucher.
Sky Boucher, and you used to go to school here?
SKY Boucher. I used to go here last year, yes, sir.
For the next hour, sheriff's deputies moved room to room, making sure that there were no other threats. Eventually, students were evacuated and taken to the First Baptist Church of Ocala, where their families were waiting. In the hours after the shooting, though, students had shared their experiences on social media. One student, Jake Malahoyt, posted a photo of desks, chairs, and other furniture stacked high against the classroom door, a desperate attempt to barricade themselves from the shooter. 3 years later, in April 2021, Boucher is given 30 years in prison for that shooting. Judge Lisa Herndon ordered him to serve 25 years behind bars, followed by 30 years of probation. He was also required to pay over $14,000 in restitution. Now, while many feel no sympathy for him, they are at least grateful that his conscience kicked in, making him realize the gravity of his actions.
I want to be put away, or I can't hurt anyone.
Do you feel sorry? Do you feel remorseful?
Yeah. That's why I put down the gun. I could have kept going.
Overseas now to breaking news where investigators say at least 10 people have been killed in a school shooting at a school in central Sweden.
February 4th, 2025. A horrific school shooting unfolds at Campus Risberska, an adult education center in Örebro, Sweden. The institution mainly serves people who never finished primary or secondary school, and for reasons still unclear, one of its former students decided to turn it into a war zone. The shooter, 35-year-old Ricard Anderson, had taken math classes there years earlier, but had struggled to find a job for over a decade. No one knows exactly what pushed him over the edge, but judging by the destruction he left behind, it's obvious he held some deep resentment toward this school. On the day of the attack, Anderson showed up to the campus about an hour and a half before opening fire. Surveillance would catch him near the entrance at 10:59 a.m. And roughly 90 minutes later, chaos erupted. Witnesses, mainly teachers, described hearing gunfire in the hallway, followed by an eerie silence that lasted nearly half an hour before more shots rang out. This video, taken by a student at the school, perfectly captures the eerie stillness that filled the building as the shooter wandered the hallways. One student, trapped in a restroom, managed to capture the chilling moment on camera when the shooter stormed in, firing at anyone in sight. The gunshots were thunderous, and that student had to stay absolutely still. One slight noise, and bam, it would have been game over for him. Luckily, many students were off campus at the time, making it easier for those who were there to escape to safety. By the time the halls were nearly empty, law enforcement stormed the building. And after a brief exchange of gunfire, Anderson was found dead at the scene. Whether he took his own life or was killed by police remains unclear, as the case is still under investigation. What is clear, however, is that he acted alone, and the weapons he used were no joke. This guy was armed with semi-automatic rifles and Glocks, all legally registered in his name. Even more disturbing, he managed to sneak those weapons into the school by hiding them in a guitar case and 2 bags. In total, 11 people were murdered and 12 others were injured. What you're looking at isn't a scene from a war zone or a terrorist attack. This is pure chaos unleashed by a single man, Connor Betts, who was on a deadly rampage, having already murdered multiple people that night. Now, this wasn't a school shooting per se, but it was the rampage of a would-be school shooter who chose to unleash his carnage on society instead. On August 4th, 2019, Connor Betts unleashed terror outside Ned Pepper's bar in Dayton, Ohio's Oregon District, killing 9 people, including his own sister, and injuring 27 others. Before that night, Betts had already raised plenty of red flags. Back in high school, he got suspended after a teacher discovered a disturbing list that he made of people he desired to kill. That list included names of fellow students and even the teacher herself. But despite a police investigation into that, no charges were ever filed against Betts. His classmates were terrified of him, and his ex-girlfriend later revealed that he suffered from visual and auditory hallucinations while obsessing over the idea of carrying out a school shooting. Wonderful. I mean, see why I say he could have been a school shooter? Well, thankfully, he didn't shoot up his high school, but didn't matter because years later, he'd commit one of the most devastating shootings ever recorded. On the day of the attack, investigators found that Betts had liked a post on X supporting gun control, along with several others about the El Paso shooting that had just claimed 23 lives. Then he got his hands on a .223 caliber AR-style pistol, high-capacity drum magazines, and 250 rounds of ammo. That night, he heads out with his sister, Megan Betts, and a mutual friend to the Oregon District, a lively stretch of bars and clubs. They were all having fun, but little did they know it would be the last time they'd all be together. After a while, Betts went in to retrieve his guns from the car, and at exactly 1:10 a.m., chaos erupted. This guy fires 41 shots in just 30 seconds, hitting a person in an alley before turning the gun on his sister and their mutual friend. At this point, the entire district was in flames as law enforcement was already on the scene, engaging Betts in a fierce gun battle. And from the last video recorded he was captured in, Connor Betts was about to run into a crowded bar to slaughter even more people. But before he could make it inside, police gunned him down just steps from the entrance. And the aftermath was just as horrifying as the incident itself. 6 men and 3 women dead, plus 2 innocent bystanders accidentally shot by police. Now imagine what could have happened if Betts had made it inside that bar. Like honestly, this wasn't just some troubled kid acting out. Connor Betts was a full-blown serial killer in the making. At around 11:19 a.m. on April 20th, 1999, 2 students, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, dressed in long trench coats, opened fire on their classmates outside Columbine High School, a quiet suburban school just south of Denver. After taking down several students in the parking lot, they stormed inside, making their way to the library, where they carried out the deadliest part of their attack. Unfortunately, what unfolded that day would go down as the most infamous school shooting in America's history. But here's the thing. This tragedy wasn't just meant to be a school shooting, it was supposed to be a school bombing, a massacre on a scale that would have been even more devastating. And here's why. Earlier that morning, Harris and Klebold had placed 2 duffel bags inside the school's cafeteria, each one packed with propane bombs set to detonate during the busy A-lunch shift at 11:15 a.m. Their plan? The explosion would take down the cafeteria's ceiling, killing hundreds instantly. And as survivors would run for their lives, the 2 would pick them off one by one from the outside, killing them all. It was a cold, calculated strategy. Harris had even rigged his car with additional explosives, parking it far away from his usual spot. Something his friend, Brooks Brown, had noticed earlier that day. Now, the goal was to have the car bombs detonate once police, ambulances, and reporters arrived, killing as many first responders as possible. On top of that, they would plant another bomb in a park 3 miles away, set to go off first as a distraction to pull law enforcement away from the school. Everything had been mapped out, but there was one major flaw in their plan. They had no idea how to wire a detonator. So despite all that preparation, none of the bombs went off, thank God. So instead of the catastrophic explosions they had envisioned, they're left standing there, waiting. In fact, just before the attack began, Klebold filmed Harris pacing inside the school cafeteria, watching the clock, waiting for the bombs to detonate. That chilling footage would be the last recording of these two before they unleashed their rampage. And when the time came and the bombs failed to explode, Klebold hesitated. He had doubts. Cold feet even. The original plan had them standing apart for a better shooting range. But when they finally opened fire, the two were side by side at Klebold's assigned position. Many believe that Harris had convinced Klebold at the last moment to go through with it. And even then, it would be Harris that did most of the shooting. This was the moment they opened fire in the cafeteria and had everyone running to safety. This also shows both killers roaming around the cafeteria with their guns after setting a section of that cafeteria on fire and throwing propane bombs. At 11:29 a.m., Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold stormed the library, where 52 students, 2 teachers and 2 librarians were hiding in fear. Harris fired his shotgun twice at a desk, and as they moved further into the library, Harris and Klebold spotted Kyle Velasquez, who was sitting at a row of computers. Kyle, having a disability, wasn't able to react or hide. Klebold raised his shotgun and fired, hitting him in the head and back, killing him instantly. Next, Harris and Klebold turned toward the library windows and fired outside, aiming at the police who had just arrived. Officers fired back, forcing him to retreat. Harris then removed his trench coat, crouched down, knocked on a table twice, and fired a single shotgun blast, killing 1 student instantly. The recoil from the gun kicked back into Harris's face and injured his nose. The two would continue to fire at students, injuring several more before briefly leaving the library. But they soon returned and aimed their weapons outside again, firing at police. Officers responded with gunfire, but neither Harris nor Klebold were hit. By 12:05 p.m., the gunfire inside Columbine had finally stopped. The last shots fired that day came not from the police, but from Harris and Klebold themselves. In an instant, they ended their own lives.